Welcome back to the weekly news roundup and the Linux news edition. This is for all of the news related to Linux and other free and open source specific news that I found noteworthy throughout the week that did not make its way into a regular video. Of course, I think I did one video this week that was not standalone, and I had a lot of other weird things going on. So that's that. You can catch the show live 8 p.m. Eastern time on Fridays, or you can just catch the edited versions, whichever you prefer. But with that, let's go ahead and dive on into the Linux and open source news. The first is we did talk a couple weeks ago on some of the problems on Wayland, and one of the big things that prevents content creators like myself from using Wayland for a lot of our production is a lot of the functions just don't work right. For example, if I just need to do a quick, or if I'm doing B-roll, for example, for a distro review, it is the absolute easiest to do that if you're doing VM to do a simple screen recorder. Well, simple screen recorder doesn't work on Wayland. There's a few things that will work okay, like the new built-in system on Gnome will work okay, but the problem is that one doesn't have audio. And I still do not know of any screen recorder that will work flawlessly under Wayland, capture screen and capture audio. It might exist, and if you have one of those, please let me know in the comments. I would like to have a look at it. OBS is starting to get some Wayland functionality, so we're starting to see that, but even that, sometimes you have to fight with it. And so I think everybody jumping to Wayland is going to be a big hit for the Linux content creator, even though a lot of the people in the Linux content creator space actually develop on Windows and Mac, which is kind of scary and frightening, but not all of them, but I do know a number of them do. Hey, at least I'm pure Linux because I walk the walk that I talk. Okay. So this one here is a developer. And again, in that Wayland video, we talked about the big problem with Wayland is they're like, we have Wayland, but nothing works. And then Wayland literally depends on all of the developers to fix their software for their crap. All right. And so the app developer gets screenshot app Shutter working on Wayland. Was it the Shutter developers? Of course it wasn't the Shutter developers. They're too busy tweaking it all out with X. Okay. No, they're not in Joe Rogan's studio with Elon Musk tweaking out with X. They're talking about the X11. This was just a user that got frustrated with the fact that he didn't have Shutter working on Wayland, and so he decided to fork it out and produced Shutter on Wayland, which is a separate application that works in Wayland. Now, I did have a look at this, and it appears that Shutter does not record audio. I couldn't find any indicator. Effectively, it's the same feature that Gnome has built in to their system. You click the button or there's a hotkey for it, and you can either do a capture, a screen, or a window. You can toggle between the picture or the camera. You can record. The problem is no audio. You can get great screen sharing with no audio. And that really is fundamentally the problem that we need. Simple screen recorder. The reason I like it is very simple. I have a simple checkbox. Do you want to record audio? Yes or no? Okay. Which screen? Okay. Yes or no? Got it. Done. We're done. Okay, I don't have to mess around with a bunch of other stuff. But so this guy got this working. Now the challenge is he didn't completely fork it to a completely different application, so it will completely conflict if you already have Shutter on your device. Of course, you have Shutter on your device when you're using Wayland, it's useless anyway. So you have to uninstall the original Shutter, and then you can install the Shutter on Wayland, which is going to work. So it's to install, you must remove any existing versions installed from the Ubuntu repositories. I don't know if he's only working with Ubuntu, I guess. You can use a PPA or a random dev you found on some blog. Okay, that's just, that's how to uninstall it. All right, and then if all else fails, you can just use the sudo apt remove Shutter, and then you're going to download the latest Shutter on Wayland deb from the installer. So there's a GitHub page. The deb installer isn't located on the release package. Of course, they do tell us that, yes, you do actually have to install the extra package in Ubuntu. You have to manually install gdebi because Ubuntu sucks and does not allow you to install debs anymore. without installing GDEB first. So there you have it. So you can now, if you're running Ubuntu at least, or something else on Wayland that can support a dev package, you can get a version of Shutter that works with Wayland. Again, it wasn't developed by Wayland. It wasn't developed by the Shutter developers. It was a guy that just got pissed off that Shutter wasn't working with Wayland. So he did it. So there you have it. And that is a classic example of referencing that video, which I will link here below. That is really, is that principle, is that Wayland itself, it looks nice and flashy. The problem is there's too much backend. Like, they complain that X is a problem, but X works. Wayland, for a lot of these functions, these core peripheral functions, doesn't work. And so you end up having to install an X compatibility layer or do some other weird nonsense. And Wayland is going to become just as patchy as X is. So shut up about it and use what works. You know what I mean? That's kind of my point. Not to completely dunk on Wayland, but hey, it still kind of sucks. At least for a person in my position that has to rely on audio and video working across the platform. Because, you know, it's one thing if I want to, you know, have a window compositor that shows me the folder icons and whatever else, that's fine. But if I need to actually do solid production work with audio or video, yeah, good luck. But hey, at least we have Shutter now. Speaking of things that Gnome has done, this was actually news to me. You can actually do customized folders on Gnome, although it was very difficult to get to. I guess it was fairly convoluted and whatever else. Well, what they were actually doing is they were doing some other fix, and in doing that, they serendipitously made this show up. So I guess the tornado flying through the junkyard to make a Boeing 747 is really a thing, because somehow in the chaotic mix of fixing something in Nautilus, they accidentally made this function easier, which they were able to easily port into the simple settings folder. So now it becomes infinitely easier to set custom icons on side of folders in Nautilus. So if you're using Gnome or anything else that's using Nautilus, then you should have this option where now when you pull up the folder properties, you will now get a parent folder dialog box, which is going to give you the ability to easily make some adjustments. So here is what it looks like. So what it is for clarity, it's not the parent folder dialog box. It's, you now have this edit button on the folder properties. So you can click on this edit button, and then when you click on the edit button, then it's going to give you the ability to put an icon in place of that folder. So this is something that Cinnamon does nicely, and a lot of other distros do this nicely. I know KDE does as well, where your home folders, for example, your downloads will have a download icon, and your home documents will have a document icon. You know, downloads, you know, it makes finding the folders easier. Of course, in Cinnamon, you can customize the colors directly and all sorts of other fun stuff. This actually is a good positive direction. And hey, if you're using Nautilus, you will have the ability to go ahead and do that. So you can, there's the edit button, and then there is the reset button to go back to the custom. So there you have it. Anyone using Nautilus, that will be a benefit to you. Well, if you're using Graphene OS and you should be using something other than stock Android or stock whatever Samsung nonsense they give you, you should be using something to the effect of Graphene or EOS. EOS was rebranded with a new name. Thank God, but I can't remember what it is now. Or Lineage, just some custom ROM. You should be doing one of those instead. Well, Graphene OS is one of the more secure. It's one of the few that allows you to lock the bootloader as well, with still having a good verified system. Well, they're now building CarPlay into it. Of course, if you're, you know, using those cars that Louis Rossmann reported on not too long ago, you know, it won't matter because they're pulling CarPlay out of some of those. But if you do have a vehicle that has CarPlay involved, then Graphene OS is going to be able to start doing this. Now, what they did is they put a compatibility layer, like a privacy compatibility layer in between to still allow you to use this, but sandboxing the Google Play features outside of it so that Google cannot spy on anything else the phone is doing. So they basically produced a proxy for the Google Play services that is required to make Android Auto work. And so now if you're using Graphene OS in the future versions, I think the latest version, this is rolled out as an alpha function, and then it'll be tested and then roll out more officially later. Now, it is not enabled by default, so you will need to go into your settings and enable this feature if you want to. It is disabled by default because it is potentially a privacy issue. And so you want to make sure that you're being very careful with any of that kind of stuff. So they say, is in the final testing, should show up as alpha very soon. Graphene OS will have granular permissions for auto, including options to allow wired or wireless connections, as well as being able to turn off or on audio routing and phone call controls. Android Auto won't be enabled by default, though users will need to manually turn it on. So if you are driving around in a car that has a CarPlay on it, you can go ahead and do that from Graphene OS. And on to our final story, Mozilla Directions. What is next for Mozilla? I am conflicted about this one, and I want you to let me know what you guys think about this. So on the one side, what Mozilla is worried about is they're worried that they're not going to be succeeding if they just focus on the browser, of course, because the Chromium browser is gobbling up more and more of the market share. I think they need to personally stop doing all of the other nonsense they're doing and focus on making the best browsers possible, and then focus the rest of their time on making sure people are aware of what the browser can do and how to get it installed. Because I think the problem is right now, Mozilla, I need to understand Mozilla itself. There's a Mozilla Foundation that is a nonprofit. There's a Mozilla Corporation that the Firefox browser is a part of. So Mozilla Corporation is for profit. The Mozilla Foundation is a nonprofit. So you have all that, but then the profit is trying to get a lot of different things going on. I think one of the challenges that we have is that the big challenge we have ultimately is that Mozilla itself is so dependent on Google. They get a lot of money from Google for making Google their default search engine. That's what happens. They make the vast majority of their money comes from Google. So it's basically like Google is the CEO of the company town giving them their money that they can go ahead and use for whatever purpose. All right. And so they're trying to figure out how to become independent from Google. So I completely understand that. And so by doing this, they're doing some startup investments. They're doing a Mastodon client called Mammoth. They acquired FakeSpot, an extension to help reviewers find fake reviews. So they have launched Mozilla AI to bring open source ethos into the AI world, which are all laudable goals to be sure. And I think that it's good if they can find a way to have a revenue stream that is no longer dependent on Google, which is the owner of their biggest competition. And remember that Apple still exists because Microsoft propped them up for a while. So I guess the good news is Apple is more profitable than Microsoft these days. The bad news is they're both the, I think one's the devil and one's the false prophet. I just don't know which one's which. But with that though, Mozilla is trying to figure this out. Now, I see this as a downside that Mozilla is doing all these things and it distracts them from making their browser as good as it is. And my worry is if they look down and say, well, this Firefox browser is not really profitable, but this AI thing is, and they pivot entirely and abandon this, now we have a situation where one web browser dominates the whole world. And so that really is, in my opinion, the worst thing we have to think about is that the possibility that if Mozilla doesn't maintain this lightning focus on the Firefox browser, that the Firefox browser codebase could die, and with it is the death of every other browser that's not tied to Google. And that is certainly an issue. Now, maybe if that were to happen, maybe regulators might step in and force the spinoff, force a divestment for the purposes that Google would now control a monopoly over a lot of the internet, certainly a monopoly over analytics and the web browser that interfaces the two. That is certainly a problem. So let me know your thoughts about that. Do you think Mozilla is making a good direction with all of these extra endeavors, or do you think that they should probably focus more on the browser? I'm inclined to say I understand why they're doing it because they need to stay afloat, but at the same time, it does distract away from developing the browser and preventing people from knowing that the browser is a thing. Unless they take off with, 4 or 5 other really popular products and then it all defaults to the Mozilla browser. Of course, then Google will come down and be like, antitrust, you have to force them to allow Chrome. Go figure. But those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think about all those in the comments down below. If you'd like to help support the channel, we do have a Subscribestar page, subscribestar.com/switchedtolinux. If you'd like to go on over there and join us, you can help support the channel over there. And also you can support the channel by subscribing, by hitting that like button. And if you are a person that is not as inclined to me to turn off notifications, you can turn on notifications. I'm not bothered if you don't, though, because I don't turn on notifications on anything. The channel's here, guys. You know where to find it. But if you hit that like and that subscribe button, then it'll be more likely to recommend you things without being annoyed by notifications. But turn on the notification bell if you do like such things. That being said, thank you for watching, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux. Thank you for watching this video from Switched to Linux. This channel would not be possible without the backing of the program supporters scrolling on the screen now. You can be a supporter at Patreon at patreon.com/TOMM or at thinklifemedia.com. I also want to thank the open source community who creates such excellent software that makes producing this show possible. Please remember to support your software communities. Thank you, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.